So welcome everyone to this side event at the 66th Commission on the Status of Women, titled The Heart of Resilience, the Climate Crisis as a Catalyst for a Culture of Equality. My name is Safira Rameshwar, and I serve as a representative of the Bahá'í International Community to the United Nations here in New York City. So this event is actually based on a written statement. It was a written contribution to the Commission this year on its priority theme, which many of you will be familiar, but the theme is achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. And so our aim for this particular event is to bring some of these concepts and ideas from the statement to life. We're asking for your reactions and reflections on the statement, along with your experience, your advocacy, and your thoughts around gender equality and climate change woven into the conversation. So a number of you have been invited in advance to read the statement and prepare some thoughts to contribute to the discussion today. If you haven't had a chance to read the statement, that's also fine. We'll put a link to the statement in the chat, and I will also describe a broad outline of the main themes, and we'll also watch a short summary video to get a sense of what is being conveyed in the statement. So in terms of an overview of our time together today, we've invited 4 plenary speakers, including 2 youth activists, to share their insight on the themes as they relate to their own expertise and experience. And from there, we'll move into smaller breakout groups where we'll have facilitators who will encourage all of us to share our thoughts and experiences on the themes presented in the statement. In the breakouts, we're really striving for an active engagement. We wanted to create a space during the commission to be able to exchange thoughts, ideas, and create an opportunity to connect and get to know one another. So we'll let the breakouts kind of have their conversations and take the natural course of that discussion. And then we'll close out our event today with a multi-award-winning spoken word artist who will share a piece with us on gender justice and climate justice. So that will be a beautiful artistic way to end. So perhaps I can start with just sharing a summary of some of the main themes in the statement. So much of the conversation around this priority theme of the Commission on gender equality, climate change, environmental degradation, and disaster really highlights how women are disproportionately affected and the great injustice and the burden that they carry, from increased care responsibilities in the wake of disaster, to gender-based violence in the face of increased vulnerability, to the loss of access to natural resources and livelihoods. And so one of the first themes that this statement explores is how women and girls are uniquely situated to lead efforts towards environmental justice and how they're constructively responding to the impacts of climate change and disaster. So for example, women are often connected to large networks, and they're an integral element to community-based solutions and mobilization, whether as leaders in economic thinking, as policymakers, as climate activists. Women worldwide are making significant contributions related to climate action, to natural resource management, to food security, to scientific innovation towards sustainable solutions. And so women's insights form the range of human experience and enable the construction of a fuller picture of reality, which allows for more robust, coherent, and dynamic solutions. A second concept from the statement we're wanting to explore and discuss today is the unique leadership qualities that women and girls bring and the empowerment of the rising generation. So ensuring that the potential of women is fully harnessed will require action on at least 2 fronts: increasing women's presence in leadership roles and creating conditions for women to engage more meaningfully in community life. And then a third concept from the statement we're hoping to explore is how the challenges posed by climate change can serve as catalysts or can open opportunities to embrace new approaches to inclusive forms of governance, as well as just patterns of community life capable of unlocking the whole range of human experience. So to summarize, Women and girls are not just victims. They have great capacity to contribute. Second, the unique leadership qualities that women and girls bring. And third, how these global challenges posed by climate change can serve as an opportunity to open up new approaches to governance and new patterns of community life. So we'll give you a chance to kind of think a little bit about these themes, if they trigger any thoughts or experiences that you wish to share with us today as part of the event. So while you're thinking, we will also turn to watch a short film that summarizes some of the key points from the statement as well. So we'll turn over to this short video clip.
Women's insights form the range of human experience and enable the construction of a fuller picture of reality. Action is required on two fronts: increasing women's presence in leadership roles and creating conditions for women to engage more meaningfully in community life. At the global level, international policies guided by principles of justice, equity, and dignity will be indispensable in setting the stage for a culture of equality. The community, a building block of the global arena, can provide a space where alternative, inclusive, and cooperative ways of life can find expression, and all are empowered to develop leadership abilities. Important considerations such as how institutional and societal arrangements can be reconfigured to enable women's meaningful participation, as well as how cohesive societies can be forged even before the onset of catastrophe, could be revisited periodically in international spaces such as this commission. The challenges posed by climate change should serve as catalysts to embrace new approaches to inclusive forms of governance, as well as just patterns of community life, capable of unlocking the whole range of human experience.
Perfect, thank you so much. So we're going to turn to our plenary speakers now. So our four panelists today will share some short interventions around 4 minutes each. They're sharing their thoughts on the statement, on the intersection of gender justice and climate justice, and elaborating on some of their own work and experience as they relate to these themes. So to start off our plenary, I would like to invite Corinna Gore, a well-known climate activist, founder and executive director of the Center for Earth Ethics at Union Theological Seminary in New York. So Corinna, you have the floor. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Safira. It's just a delight to be with you. Thank you, to Dan, to the whole Baha'i International Community for all your work, for this very important statement, and for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. I really think that one of the things that comes to mind that I do think is reflected in this statement around this intersection of gender and climate crisis is the opportunity that we have to look at the way that our world is shaped, the systems that shape it, and what needs to change, not just at the level of the effects of climate change, but also at the level of the cause of what got us in this crisis in the first place. And in the sense of women's equality, we need to be careful that we don't think of this issue as bringing women into the roles and norms of what has been a man's world, so to speak. It has been the norms that have been associated, as you all put, with traditionally masculine ways as they've been conceived of. What we need to see is that the traditionally women's work in much of the world has been devalued, has been disparaged, and has been left out of what we think about when we think about the success of individuals, communities, and society as a whole. In this sense, I think it's critical that the statement has addressed that, that we are looking at in fact, bringing that that essential work, and we've come to a new understanding of that term of essential work through the pandemic. Some of us have, some of the discourse has, bringing that to the foreground, very much involved in governance and making decisions. So one of the things that's always bothered me a little bit when I hear this discussion about women's equality is sometimes people will say things like, when women enter the workforce, then GDP goes up. So this is a great thing to have women's equality. The problem with this is that GDP doesn't measure pollution, depletion of resources, or actually equity itself. GDP can go way up, and yet you have nature completely stripped and polluted, and you have a totally unequal sharing of whatever monetary benefits are received. So when GDP goes up, when people buy and sell products and services, not when there is that communal common good that's shared and cared for. So I just wanted to make the point that I think that it's so important to not fall into the rhetoric where we're losing sight of how the whole pie needs to change, not just changing who gets slices of the pie. And I think the statement does that well. I would pull out a few things. I think that particularly in the beginning, their insights form the range of human experience and enable the construction of a fuller picture of reality. Also further down, the tendency to prioritize longer term interests, consider the well-being of future generations, and explore the impact of human policies more broadly than is acknowledged now. And then later on again, where it talks about being intentionally woven into the processes of governance themselves. So I would say women are already participating very meaningfully in communities, but that it needs to be done at the level of governance. And I would cite, because I'm here speaking from traditional ancestral lands of Lenape people, but also the Haudenosaunee, known as the Iroquois, are from this region where I now live, which is in New York, and they, in a traditional matrilineal society, had always had women in very strong leadership roles. It doesn't always look the same as people might expect from an outside perspective. And so I think we also need to honor local cultures and how they conceive of leadership of these roles, and honor them, and not have it too top down a development approach that's just looking for metrics that we recognize. And I also, just in closing, want to say that from that perspective, I particularly appreciate that this statement says the community is a building block of the global arena, can provide a space for this, and community life is situated within a larger global enterprise. So I think respect for that community and the very meaningful role that women are playing is important, and I thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much, Corinna, for offering those reflections. And I love this analogy of the entire pie. The whole pie also needs to change. So thank you so much for that. I will now invite our second plenary speaker, Alperen Namanla, who is a national gender, youth, and he for she activist with UN Women based in Turkey. So Alperen, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. This is Alperen from Turkey, as Safira mentioned, and I have to...
Sorry, Alperen, somehow you were muted.
Perfect. Now you can hear me, right?
Yes,
okay, that's great. So hi, everyone, once again, and thank you for introducing me, Safira, and thank you so much for this opportunity once again. But before thanking, I have to touch upon some particular point. As we all know that we are going through rough times, and some people are dying in the world. I'm talking about Ukraine. There is a war, but I cannot call it a war. This is a massacre, and this is a murder, and I have to state that I, as a young man, stand by Ukrainian women, just as I stand by Afghan women all the time. And what they go through is our concern, not only their concern. And after stating that, now I can continue with my speech. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, as I mentioned. And as we all know, CSW 66 is focusing on the intersections of gender and climate. And this beautiful particular event that is the Heart of Resilience is evaluating such an intersection by pointing out the current situation of women and girl child when faced with climate change and environmental disasters. And my motivation as a young man is to point out such an intersection through an ecofeminist approach. And I hope I am pronouncing the name correctly. Karena put it perfectly. The statement is amazing, and it just fills the gaps that you lack in the current situation of the world. As she also stated, I hope I also use the right pronoun, she. She also stated that it is up to mostly politics and politicians to put that statement into its right position. So it should be listened, it should be heard, it should be practiced so that we can see our future that is built upon gender equality that we seek for so many generations and so many centuries till this day. And we are tired of waiting for that day. So continuing with my speech, I have to highlight what ecofeminism stands, because CSW 66 and this particular event deals with ecofeminism either way. So ecofeminism basically states that as nature is exploited, women are parallelly exploited. And this argument is grounded by scrutinizing women's position in history from an ecological perspective. Now I will take you to the classical times, a history lesson, here it comes. The times when animals were sacrificed for Demeter. So I'm pretty sure that you know the story of Demeter, Persephone, and Hades. So Hades kidnaps Persephone, and that is the daughter of Demeter, and Demeter gives them fertility in the world, which causes winter to occur. Hades was, to me, the first responsible for nature's being exploited. So I know this story is mythological, but do not forget that gender roles are based fundamentally and within such stories, within such myths, and we still carry them to this day, their minds to this day, and we have to deconstruct them now. And now I will take you to the times of Elizabeth I to Britain, the Queen of England, during the 16th century. It is a well-known fact that, again, that the seeds of colonialism were visible during that time, and Virginia, situated in America, was named after Elizabeth's nickname by Sir Walter Raleigh, a sailor, because he thought that Virginia was untouched, just like Elizabeth I, implying that the soil was virgin, just like the Queen. Here, both the land and body of a woman are exploited and colonized. This ecological imperialism has strengthened the idea of women being associated with land, which has eventually caused women to be most affected by climate change and environmental disasters. So he, in a way, romanticizes land by resembling it to a woman's body. And the land was given to a woman to handle, and if it were a must, as if it were a must or a role to comply with, I mean, dealing with the land. The mind of Sir Walter Raleigh was reflected to the occurrence of the Industrial Revolution as well. It is my point of view. It is open to interpretation, but I don't see any difference. I only see the patriarchal and heteronormative mind that deals with only the male gaze. So Industrial Revolution, world wars, and modern slavery are cause of such a mind, from all of which women are the most affected. So I will particularly exemplify what I say. In 2021, in Turkey's Mediterranean region, there burst out numerous forest fires, and I realized that at that particular year, the ones to get hurt in that fires, to lose their soils, to lose their houses were mostly women and girl child, since those fires started in the rural areas where women lived. Moreover, as they are the most disadvantaged groups in the rural areas, women could not reach to menstrual products as their belongings and such productions were burned in the fire, leading their sexual and menstrual health to deteriorate. This is just a very basic example from Turkey's forest fires that happened in 2021, just for a week. And yet, during that week, just for a week, many women suffered from this environmental disaster, while some patriarchal minds questioned feminism's point and Istanbul Convention. So I suggest that rather than questioning the experiences of the already otherized people, women in this condition, especially politicians must take concrete actions so as to ground the rights of rural women. And if someone loses their houses to a forest fire, it is expected to focus on fixing whatever's going wrong, rather than limiting the already existing rights of that person. And in this story, that particular person is women. Before finishing my words, I would like to say that feminism is about understanding one another. It is about sympathizing with the person that is lacking the basic human rights, and it is about empathizing with them. And ecofeminism, parallelly, does this by bridging what is gender with climate. I hope I did not tire you with my speech. Thank you for your patience.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Alperen. And I loved kind of this deconstruction of gender dynamics in the stories of our history. And when we were talking, you were really keen to help us to understand the trajectory of our history so that we can identify the path of our future. So thank you so much for taking us back on that history lesson of gender dynamics and those stories. So with that, I would like to invite our third plenary speaker, Yuping Chen, who is a senior program officer with the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology. So over to you, Yuping, you have the floor.
Thank you, Safira. And it's so nice to be back here at CSW. I started my UN career with CSW, so it's really nice to come back to such an active, dynamic, amazing community of people really committed to making change in the UN. I'd like to sort of start with two elements that I think are at the core of the response statement, which is this idea of leadership and opportunities for engagement. And in some ways, I think digital technologies has really opened up the space both for leadership as well as for engagement of communities, individuals with the UN and intergovernmental processes. So technology really has been a boon in many ways because it allows us to amplify our voice, find like-minded people, create movements around things that we care about. At the same time, it's been a danger because from the perspective of women and girls, increases our vulnerability to so forth, to harms online and so forth. So technology, I think, is a little bit of a dual-edged sword where we really need to work together as the international community to better harness the benefits of technology while addressing its challenges. I say this also because next year's priority theme for CSW is indeed on technology and the impact of technology for women and girls and on gender empowerment issues. So looking forward to CSW next year, I do think there is a lot of scope for that type of engagement of committed individuals such as yourself to really think about what does technology mean for gender and gender empowerment, gender equality, and these issues as well. And in the same way that technology and interested communities and really the digital revolution in online space has revolutionized, social movements and engagement around the climate community, we should really think about how much more we can do the same for the issue of technology and really bringing to the fore issues of feminism, interpretation, and really gender through using technology and that type of intersection. So I'm very inspired by what technology has done for activists and communities in the climate change space. And I think what we need to do is also bring that same sort of energy engagement to the UN as the UN discusses digital technology issues and the governance of digital technology. Some of you might know that in the Secretary General's Common Agenda report of last year, for instance, he specifically calls for a global digital compact which he sees as an outcome for the Summit of the Future that will be next September 2023. And throughout the entire of this year, my office, the Office of the Tech Envoy, will be leading an open, inclusive, outward-looking process by which we really hope to hear from everyone, not just the big tech players or the member states, but really truly everyone, as to what are the principles and the underlying issues that you think need to be addressed if we are to forge a global digital compact that is for everyone everywhere. And this is going to be a compact that binds not just the governments, but also civil society and tech companies as well. So what are the shared principles for the global digital future that we want, that will be open, free, and secure for all? And this is why I do think gender plays a critical role, in the same way that gender has now become a cornerstone of discussions in climate, where we recognize the disproportionate burden that is placed on women and girls due to the climate crisis. We also need to recognize the particular situation of women and girls and the importance of technology for gender equality issues as well. So how then can we make sure that gender is a key part of the Global Digital Compact, of the UN's discussions when it comes to the forming of this digital future that we want of next year? So this is really why I'm looking to the CSW community, all of you, to think about how you want to engage with the UN as we work towards the Global Digital Compact. This is why I do think that, precisely as outlined in the statement, there is that opportunity for both leadership as well as opportunities for engagement, because we are going to run what will be an open, multi-stakeholder process that really would benefit from the inspirational work that you have done, your commitment and your passion and your expertise in these particular areas as well. And so as we look to CSW of next year, I welcome further collaboration, and I also look forward to seeing how CSW can contribute to the Global Digital Compact that will be in next September of 2023.
Thank you so much, Yuping, and thank you for bringing this dimension of digital technology into the conversation today, because there is, I mean, such a role to be able to harness the role of technology in creating movements towards justice and the implication for climate justice and gender justice and the way that we're organizing. And would love, in the lead up to CSW, I think there are many on the call who would love to connect and be part of these spaces that you are opening up to consult about this interlinkage between gender justice and digital tech. So thank you so much. And now we'll turn to our last plenary speaker. I'd like to invite Leseho Thenanye, who is a gender and climate research activist from South Africa. So Leseho, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Farah. As stated, my name is Leseho Thenanye. I'm from South Africa. And to begin with, I think I will take away from a sentence from the statement itself. Open quote, the application of spiritual principles to the life of the community in breaking down prejudicial barriers to women's participation. Now, this was important for me because it highlighted how we needed to instinct in institutions to reinstate laws, regulations, culture, and traditions of injustices. Now, this is important because it means that we'll be creating a change and a healthy society where all members of communities feel protected and valued for their role in it, enabling equal participation, which will build confidence and credibility to systems of governance. This will then improve the efficiency of work and engagement, and this is for all sectors basically, and it will in turn improve the awareness and identity of inclusivity and its benefits when implemented accordingly in our communities. So women's participation as drivers of change in environmental issues and climate change is significant, especially to me. Which means that investing in young women is therefore key in enhancing productivity, in boosting economies, and ensuring that food security and ICT, information and communication technologies, are included. Now, when we speak of ICT, we speak of the inclusion of mobile phones, of computers, video, radio, which have shown to help expand financial services to women. And this means that intensive collaboration in our development will increase and accountability and promote specifically sustainability. Now, there is a need in increased funding for research and development regarding sustainable technologies and programs. Investments in startups, in entrepreneurs will also allow new market players to scale solutions and develop programs to accelerate adoption of technologies. Accessible and fair regional distribution of funding to support this innovation across regions will therefore be required. Viewing women as innovators who are worthy of investment will help ideas manifest into practical solutions for a clean and just future. Multiple perspectives must also be represented in creating solutions to ensure new ideas will work and can be readily adopted. So now this means that we need to share in the experiences of women and the youth in our communities and what climate issues they have faced individually. They also need to be reminded that should they come up with an idea or solution, it becomes an opportunity to make a difference in the social and economic lives of the people in their communities. Now, this allows them to solve more than just climate change issues, but also play a role in alleviating poverty and unemployment from the grassroots levels. So in aspect, the most significant part of this is including rural and urban women's perspective and prioritizing intergenerational equity, where the future generations are considered important stakeholders in engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leseho. I love that you touched on both structural change and institutional systems, as well as the culture and tradition of injustice, and innovation and technology, like kind of drawing out the ideas that women and girls have that are tied to practical solutions to make a difference, and the social and economic impact of that. So you highlight a range of really important issues that kind of ties us all together. So thank you so much. So really just so much gratitude to our panelists who've set the stage for us today and given us a number of ideas, different angles, questions to consider as we move into our breakout sessions. So a number of you, welcome to those who have joined the call. A number of you have been invited in advance to share your ideas in the breakout sessions and your reflections on the statement. In each of the breakouts, there will be a facilitator as well as a note taker, and the discussion will be exploratory. We encourage as many of you as possible to speak. You're welcome to react to what you've heard already today or bring up new dimensions and new ideas and experiences that haven't yet been mentioned. And you're welcome to stay in these breakouts as long as you wish. We want to let the natural flow of the conversation take its course without having to cut it off prematurely. So we will not be returning to the main plenary, but all of your contributions will be captured by our note taker. My group will remain here in the main room. So for those of you who are in other breakouts, once your breakout wraps up, if you would like to continue the conversation, you're welcome to come back to the main room and join the discussion that is happening here. And it's here in the main plenary that we will close with our spoken word artist to close out the event. So I wish you all a very enriched and engaging conversation, and I'll leave you into the hands of our very capable facilitators. So a few of you have been invited to share a few initial thoughts and reactions to get the ball rolling. You're very welcome to raise your hand when you feel ready to speak. But maybe Abraham, I know you have to leave a little early. If we could perhaps start with you to share your thoughts, and then others as you feel moved, if you can raise your hand and share some thoughts that you have developed in advance, that would be wonderful. Over to you, Abraham.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here and to share my thoughts. I haven't looked at the work or the statement. It's really exciting, and I feel like it's work that probably, let's say, it's really needed. especially at this time, is very timely. It's also shocking, that we're still talking about this and how to make, women participation in climate action, more relevant, given that we've had decades of reports and all that on how women are probably, let's say, fractionally or proportionately, vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. It's important that we acknowledge that there has been a slow, switch to making the participation of women in climate action and the movement, very interactive, or to make it very meaningful. And so that is why this statement comes out at a time where it's very timely and very powerful. And also because this statement moves or shifts from the usual narrative of women being, the vulnerable group, to also looking more at how to make women, active contributors to the solutions and champion climate action. So it's really good to see the two key action points that were raised in the document, which is the increasing of women's presence in leadership roles and creating conditions for women to engage more meaningfully. For me, one of the statements in the statement, sorry for using statement 2 times, but one of the key lines in the statement that was reflecting on creating opportunities for women to be actively involved in a meaningful way. I would go ahead to add the word intentional to the creation of opportunities and say we need to be intentional and intentionally create opportunities that give women the chance or the opportunity to be able to be actively involved in a meaningful way. And this is because over the years, or coming from Ghana, I've been, like I mentioned in my introduction, I'm doing my PhD right now. I'm working with women in agriculture from the northern parts of Ghana, which is a very dry place. And I've seen government and international development interventions to try and help these women adapt to the impacts of climate change. But most of the time, women have been approached as a homogeneous group and approached as consumers of these policies rather than being seen as active participants in creating solutions. And so we need to move into more bespoke, what would you say, like bespoke initiatives that target supporting women in terms of their real needs and building their capacities. So that is one of the key things that I realized in this statement that really excites me. Maybe my last reflection on the statement would be on financing this brilliant approach, or would I say a paradigm shift in looking at women involvement in climate action. And that is financing. I saw, or I realized that financing was mentioned, but I felt it wasn't hammered on enough. If we are going to be intentional in making sure that we are, encouraging, opportunities for women to be actively involved and change from being seen as, those who are vulnerable to be actively engaged in policy making and proffering solutions, then we need to be intentional on how we are going to finance these things. I mean, we have all these multilateral and global climate funds and agencies and schemes. We need to make sure we are pushing for there to be dedicated budget lines and requirements for us to see, dedicated funds to be able to push for this, new approach to engaging women in climate action. So in all, these are my key reflections on the statement, and I'm really excited that this has come out, and hopefully we can champion this more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Abraham. Some really important points, and I encourage others to kind of raise your hand in reaction or to speak. It would be really wonderful to hear your thoughts. So perhaps we can turn to Steve, if you would be willing to chime in at this point.
Sure, yeah, and I'm so excited to be with you all. I think there's such a beautiful statement in our hands right now to reflect on. So I'll kind of jump into this reflection on how men and boys can support the advancement of this work. I think the statement lays out pretty clearly that in order for us to be resilient in a moment of the climate crisis, we must cultivate conditions for women and girls to engage more meaningfully in both community life and leadership spaces. And so with that framing, the statement also offers that men should be motivated by the spirit of understanding to genuinely consult and act in concert with women. So if this is kind of the framing that we're looking at how men and boys should be engaging, I just had, like, in reading this, a couple of thoughts that I want to throw into the space for us to kind of chew on and think about a little bit. So the first being just power dynamics, right? I think when we come to this conversation around what it means to empower women at some level of leadership, we can see that there seems to be this push and pull of power dynamics where men leaders in leadership roles may see their space as a zero-sum space, right? By adding a woman's voice, are we taking away power that I currently have, right? And if we are doing so, is that something that I'm willing to abdicate? What are my incentives to doing so? And I think there's this very patriarchal thought process when it comes to, like, the structuring of our leadership spaces that at some level we must break down. Right. And so I think this statement does a really good job in helping us frame that without the active participation of women and girls, that we're only potentially, like, capturing 50% of the solutions that are needed to ensure that we don't suffer from the climate crisis. And because the climate crisis is such a traumatic issue of magnitude, I think our sense of urgency, if we're able to escalate and elevate our sense of urgency, the desire to find innovative solutions that women and girls can bring to the table seems to be a little better, right? But even if we have the desire to bring women and girls' solutions to the table, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a meaningful voice in the decision-making table, right? And that comes to maybe my second thought around what does it mean for performative engagement versus really true transformative commitment to have women and girls at the decision-making table, right? And I think we can also see this within the youth empowerment space where no matter where we are, we gotta have one token youth, right? And that tokenistic engagement can become detrimental to the actual progress of the work that we're doing, because by creating, like, a tokenistic representation of women and girls at a decision-making table without giving them a true consultative and decision-making power, whether that's through accessing resources like financing, it ends up becoming this, oh, you want gender equality? Well, check this out, we have a woman at the table, right? And it kind of, like, halts actual progress for these spaces. And so when we're in, as men and boys, when we're in these spaces, to recognize when tokenistic engagement is being present, call it out, and then also, while we are in the process of trying to transform this space from tokenistic engagement to meaningful engagement, what we can do for those who are already at the table is to lift up solutions and insights brought by women and girls as value-adding resources, right? Oftentimes when we create divisions, whether it's gender-based divisions or ideological divisions, one of the largest challenges we have is trying to understand what the other values, right? And recognizing that we're all human and that we're actually just one giant family. If we're able to dissolve those divisions, it's a lot easier, right? But, like, the practical matter, if we have divisions, there are obviously different ideological things that we're valuing. And so identifying what we're valuing and then trying to frame and package what we're able to offer in a way that speaks to that line allows us to perhaps walk in more concert and in step with existing patriarchal leadership structures. I have some other thoughts, but maybe I'll just close with one thing in terms of how we can move this forward. I think thinking about, like, how we build resilience through community engagement is great. And perhaps the one thing that I would close on is the need for us to cultivate mutual respect and understanding, right? And I think as long as we have that fundamental underpinning of respect, then we can begin to see that women are being marginalized, that they're left out of conversations, that within power decision-making structures within our communities, that their voices aren't being heard. Like, if we don't have respect for each other, then that easily is washed away, right? So as allies, one of the key things we can do in cultivating is helping our peers and those in power understand, empathize, and cultivate respect.
Thank you so much, Steve. And if there are more points that you have, maybe we can come back to you at a later point if thoughts are triggered. But yeah, this piece about the role of men and boys and moving beyond kind of tokenism, I think is an excellent piece. Others, would anyone else like to share at this point? Otherwise, I can call on you. Ellen, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Hi everyone, so as I said earlier, my name is Ellen. I'm here representing Medical Herstory. So that is a youth-led international not-for-profit that is working towards advancing gender health equity. And I'm also a master's student for global health and management. So I actually had some presentations today on the impacts of climate change and health. So it's all very interrelated at the moment. So thank you for inviting me today. Reading the sort of the brief, the written piece has been really fantastic. I suppose some of the takeaways that I'd maybe like to talk about are youth involvement and youth leadership, obviously as well as women's leadership. So I think maybe this is just a perspective I have from being within the UK. I think if you say to any a child of school age, if you say, can you name a climate activist, can you name someone who's working towards climate change, they'll probably say Greta Thunberg. That's probably the number one person that youths are going to mention. And I think, you know, it's really important to get youths involved in this conversation, and it's important to sort of, as you just mentioned, not just have tokenistic involvement, not just sort of tick off, yes, we have this person, that's done, to actually give youths the voice and the power to show other people that yes, you can have this say as well. You don't have to have gone to this university and done this. You can be involved and you can make a change as well. So as one of the sort of plenary speakers earlier was saying, I think a bottom-up approach is really important in this as well, and it's really important for both young women and girls engagement and youth engagement in general to be able to show that yes, you can have a say. I think, you know, especially for younger generations, climate change is something that's really at the front of all of their thoughts. It's something they're extremely aware about and nervous about. So to be able to create these collaborative and engaging spaces for people to be involved, I think is something really important. And I sort of enjoyed in the piece reading about some of the examples where this has been done. So I think that's one thing that was maybe a big takeaway for me for that.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Ellen, for sharing. And also just to hear a little bit about your work too is fantastic.
Sophia, can I go ahead to add to that?
Go ahead, Alpha. Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you so much. So I just wanted to add to that, like the leadership forum, sorry, my bad. They're making too much noise behind me. For leadership quality for women and girls, I just wanted to add a little bit to that, as she was just saying. For me, I believe that you don't have to be like, you know, like a famous person and woman to, you know, to make a change. You can be somebody like your sister, your, you know, like your daughter, somebody that next to your friend that can start making the change. Like I can tell you some little bit stories. Like one time I remember when we came from Jeonju, I was speaking on the podium. I was so nervous. At that day, I couldn't even speak that, like I couldn't even read my note. But I remember Jadea told me one time, Rihanna don't like her voice, the way her voice sound when she's singing. And she told me that herself, she don't feel, she feel the same thing too. I'm like, okay, if these two people can feel that same way, so I feel the same way too, because sometimes I don't like the way that my voice sound after I hear it back. So that's why it makes me feel more nervous. That's why it started changing my mind a little bit, you know? So, and other things too, like other people that I react to, like a woman that changed a lot of things to me. showing that leadership is Hawa, and I'm pretty much sure all of you can agree to that. That she unified like both, like bringing youth to the UN, even though a lot of people was against it. So she didn't let that, bring her down. She showed her leadership as a woman to bring that to the UN. Now everybody talk about all the time about, like youth being at the UN. So all that stuff, those are just examples. You don't have to be like really famous or have to have a lot of resources to bring it in. You can do it right now if you want to. And also too, as a parent, a son and daughter, I can tell you that I like my daughter more because of my son. My daughter showed me more leadership than my son. But even that, my wife always told me that I like my daughter more because of I'm kind of biased. But I feel like sometimes, they can show early, in early stage, because she always trying to help. She's always like dear, like for me, like all the time. Even though she's the youngest one, she always trying to show something that is like leadership with. So I just want to add that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alpha. And something that you said, I think just triggered a lot of thoughts. So we've got Ifeanyi, then Mila, then Aishu, and then Nishat, and we can go in that order. So Ifeanyi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here. Just like I've emphasized in the group I was in before. By the way, sorry for the late introduction. My name is Ifeanyi Ofodu Raymond. I'm from Nigeria and the UNICEF Office to the African Union Youth Champion on Ending Harmful Practices. So mostly the important impact I want to make in this consultation is that we should all also shape our minds to understand that climate change increases the vulnerability of girls to harmful practices. So when we talk about harmful practices, we're talking about child marriage and female genital mutilation. So as we are speaking to you right now, some children are being displaced because of flood. And as they are being displaced, their fathers are selling them off to marriages just to be able to, get that burden off themselves. And it is something that is really going on that has less attention on. And we are praying that, the global communities get to stress on this. The joint program between UNFPA and UNICEF is trying a lot, but we need more support, to get this more centered and talked about. Climate change is a very big problem. And when you look at the problem of gender inequality in climate change, it is more disheartening because the people that get to bear this brunt are children. And when you see children being vulnerable to climate change, it changes a lot of things because they are the future generation. So I want us to please be conscious. Let us be aware of this problem, that climate change increases harmful practices, and harmful practices lead to gender-based violence. And gender-based violence is the #1 problem of gender inequality. I will be leaving soon because of the time differences, and I'm so happy. Thank you for inviting me, Sapira, and trust me, next time I will be here to join you, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful you could join us. Over to you, Mila.
First of all, once again, I know that I've introduced myself, but really it is an indeed enormous pleasure to be with all of you here today, taking into account from where all of you are tuning and taking into account that all of us, no matter of what we are doing, we are all fighting for gender equality, for peace, and for actually taking women as an accountable in accountable ways. So what I would like to actually put focus on, I believe that this was mentioned by a lot of those who were talking previously, is the focus that you have put it in the document on the women's leadership has been amazing. The way you've did that, the way you conceptualized that, the way you've explained why is women leadership so crucial in our way to moving forward on finding gender justice and climate justice is really something to be complimented. But due to my experience, I would like to add something to that, what I think is important. And I believe that maybe this would be helpful for, I don't know, other documents to come and other contributions for upcoming Commission Status of Women. So let's firstly talk about this. We know that we cannot move forward without women, because women are not only the main victims of climate change, they are on the main front. They are the one who are doing everything. They are the one who are leading these processes, and they are the one who are giving inspiration to others to move forward. But when we talk about that, we are seeing how many women all around the world are marginalized, how many women that have been affected by climate change, that are coming from the most affected climate change areas, are not even taken into account. And they're doing so much work. And if we keep on being silent to these problems, we can easily understand the fact that gender equality is not even near to us. And that is devastating, because that is what we are fighting for. And that is what all of us in our work are rooting for. So what we must focus on, and I saw that there is linkage in the document with these two terms, is the women leadership on grassroots levels. That can be only achieved if we promote education. Education is necessary in this, because we must break the patriarchal social stigma that is around us. The girls that are coming from the most affected areas in the world by climate change are definitely coming from the areas that have been affected by the patriarchal social ideology. And if we do not take this fact into account, we cannot move forward. We cannot build our path towards gender justice and climate justice. And this is the focus of the CSW 66 in our conversation. And that is why I'm putting this on the table. The other thing that we must understand is that in this linkage between women leadership and working at grassroots levels, we must achieve sustainability. When we are talking about sustainability, we must be aware of the fact that all of the efforts that women are making must be continuous, because we cannot let the woman to have a space, to have spaces to speak. We cannot let women only to have like spaces to raise their voice in certain things, like for example, only to have a presence somewhere, only to be present because of the number, only to be present because of their gender. That is not how we want to do this. If we want to raise voice on sustainability, and if we want to put an effect on the sustainability, the focus on sustainability, we must be aware of the fact that we need to support women all the way through. As for the other thing that I want to focus on is accessibility. You know, a lot of women who are fighting for climate justice and who are fighting for gender equality are not even having a basic access to some basically primary and essential things and essential spaces where they can raise their voice. And we must work on that together, because those things where they're not having access are directly linked to the poverty and are directly linked to the patriarchal social stigma. So we need to work on this through all our way, because this is the only way that we are going to find solution for climate change. This is the only way that we are going to preserve the idea of gender equality, and this is the only way that we can fight on if we want to save this planet. And I'm hoping that all of you are understanding the fact that I'm telling this not only as a person who wants to take space, as a tokenistic activist, because a lot of people are certainly believing that young feminist advocates are tokenized. I'm telling this, and I'm telling it in front of all the women, young women and girls that I met and that are having these problems. And I'm telling it from my experience and from my heart. And I know that this is the only way for us to think about the better future of this world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mila. And you touch on so many important points and really give a different dimension, give a fuller picture to some of the themes in the statement. So thank you so much for doing that. I'll hand over to Aishu.
Sure, thank you, Safira. Many of you made very poignant remarks. I just wanted to add something actually that Steve had mentioned, the concept of the world as one family. So that of course relates, some of you have been familiar with the Sanskrit term Vasudeva Kutumbakam. So I really like how the statement that the Baha'i International Community has published reflects that, and the importance of collaboration, and definitely including, both men and women. So just to again highlight on that point, I really like what Steve had mentioned, because we are in this together and having collective, solutions to solve this, to overcome this challenge. Another thing also I really liked is the simplicity of the language. A lot of people can relate to it. The jargon actually makes a very big difference as well in terms of communication. Sometimes not everybody may know that the linkage between gender and climate change. I've actually also noticed this myself with another fellow colleague as well during the first edition of the Youth CSW in 2016, where we had the chance to have a discussion on exactly what we're all conversing on, gender and climate change. And not everybody knew that there was a linkage. So I think having communication such as the statement that's published will help people see that. So I wanted to just applaud Safir, you, and of course the entire community, because I think this is also another very key aspect, communication. People, they are passionate, but they don't necessarily know. And sometimes I know the technical jargon, which I know many of you, I've had the privilege of listening, have brought this up in various spaces, is something to be addressed while discussing even the linkage between gender and climate change. And once again, I really like the emphasis on collaboration, which again relates to the 17th Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you again, and I pass it back to you, Safira.
Thank you so much, Aishu. And I'll hand it to Nishat. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Safira and Aishu, Steve. I do agree with you how, for me, I think I'm just going to answer the question that it says, how increase women, in leadership role, problem solving, and decision making, it's important. Because I agree on that. Right now, we are living in climate emergency, and then you can technically make every job a climate job. For example, right now I'm teaching, in the weekend at Bank Street, which is with the Columbia University School of Education. So I'm teaching children who are in middle school, so like age 12 to 15. And I had an option that I'm teaching science, but what kind of science I'm going to be teaching. So I told my boss that I want to teach sustainability in science, which is, you can teach the climate change. And my boss was happy because she said, this is the most important, topic right now. And what we can do is that bring awareness. For example, I can take my kids one day for a beach cleaning activity, or I teach them how the climate change is creating, the global warming, and there is a forest fire in California, just to make it relevant. So I feel like women, as women, we understand, we are more in tune with nature. And a lot of the men is still, they don't understand. Like in a household, I feel like it's our duty to teach our children, or whoever, the kids that we teach, or the kids at home, about how to take initiative, to combat the climate change. So I feel like what we do in Women in Leadership, it's to create the jobs or whatever we are doing, and to teach sustainability like every day.
Thank you, Nishat. And it's really nice to hear about your work with kids and that educational process. I will hand to Nazijan. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Nazijan and I'm from Turkey. I'm very happy to be here. I had a chance to read the statement. This inspiring statement gave me a very different perspective. In addition to the shares of all my friends, I would like to say a short part that affects me. I think it's very important to increase the number of environments where women should be together with men. Basically, both have incredible insight and experience, so it is hard to choose the path for any of them. Managing a moment of crisis together, working to overcome common problems, and overcoming obstacle together is something we must learn. At this point, when I think of my own local community, I still find that many women don't have a voice at home and don't freely share their beliefs and choices, or they left out in moments of decision making. When I thought about this statement, I came to the idea that there should be more environments where women and men can come together, think together, act together, and learn together in all issues. For this, as Mila mentioned, it is necessary to give attention to continue and increase the existing efforts, both grassroots and international level. These are my personal reflection. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, that integration and that kind of working together is so important. I'll hand over to Vanessa.
Thank you so much. It's really an interesting discussion and there's so much to learn. My contribution is not far from what everybody is talking about. I think it'll just be an add-on. From the beginning, I think we've already established that women and men experience climate change differently. We're looking at a world where there's gender inequalities which are persisting up to this day, and it affects us as both sexes in how we adapt to the situation. So for women, we get heightened domestic violence cases, there's sexual intimidation, there's rape at its peak. And of course, we're talking about the lessening of opportunities for girls to go back maybe to school, and also for women to just earn an income. So what is one thing that I have been thinking of ever since we started this discussion? I would want to see the world lead itself towards gender transformation, especially coming from Africa. In a traditional African setup, the concept of gender is very misunderstood from definition level. So we look at it as it being about women, stubborn women who want to take up men's roles, and we do not think of it as a progressive term, because if we start to think of it as progressive, then we're going to realize that we're looking at efforts which should suppress social and gender norms, which are instead making women become lesser in our society. What we should realize is that it is important to ensure equal spaces and resources for women and men to participate in a climate disaster, because climate change is affecting the both of us, and we need decisions to be coming from both sides so that it makes action and all decisions to be at an equal level. Climate finance should be accessible to both men and women so that we can generate benefits which are mutual, and we make sure that light is getting even to the other side of a room. I would like to answer the question, are women victims? I'm saying a big no. Women are strategists. Women are powerful people. If put in a room, our ideas are solution-based, and we can always have answers to certain problems where we're expected to shun away. So women should be included from the design and planning of policies, programs, projects, from financing, implementation, and even monitoring and evaluation. Women have, from time immemorial, have proven to be leading the way in equitable and sustainable manners. And I feel that the same can be replicated in a climate crisis. Across all sectors, women can be very innovative and their expertise can transform lives. So men and women, we should all come to a point where we sit in the same room, we talk solutions, and we tell our side of the story so that we can have tailor-made solutions which fit the both of us and benefit the both of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vanessa. Yeah, that's excellent. I love this idea that women are strategists, to be included in the design and the creation of solutions. I love that. So handing to Flavia.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Hi, everyone. Thank you again, all of you, for your statements. My name is Flavia again. I represent Girl Rising. I'm the program producer for their Future Rising initiative, and I oversee the fellowship program, which is a year-long program that supports youth leaders who are working at the intersection of gender equity and environmental justice. So this conversation is really like key to what the fellowship program is about and what the Future Rising program is about. And so I was really excited to be a part of this discussion and listen to all of your feedback. A lot of what you said really struck me. So, you know, on the topic of how men are, what role men should play in why they're important in this discussion of including women in leadership positions and in tackling the climate solutions. You cannot change a society when only half of the population is taught to value, you know, all the members equally. So it doesn't matter how we educate women and how we empower them if we don't do the same for boys, because essentially we need everyone to be on board and to sort of value women equally in order for their contributions to be taken seriously. It's not enough for just the girls to believe that. This is a huge part of what we're dealing with in the fellowship right now, figuring out how to incorporate boys' stories as well, because it's important to tackle both empowering women and helping men understand the value of women's role in society in order to have them be a part of these solutions. I really love some of the points that Steve brought up about, you know, when we think about giving women more power and in our society, a lot of men, you know, what is the incentive for men to give up their power? And it's exactly right what you said about if we're ignoring the contributions of women, we're only capturing about 50% of the solutions that we need to tackle climate change. As you know, Vanessa just highlighted, women are strategists. They contribute to a lot of these solutions, and that should be enough of an incentive to include them in these conversations. I also wanted to talk about the sort of like how women can be leaders and what they can contribute in this space. So as a lot of you brought up, women and girls are disproportionately impacted by climate change. They get the snowball effects of gender-based violence, increased poverty, and they lose access to education. And it's not just that they're disproportionately impacted, but it's also important to remember that they are key to coming up with these climate solutions. When you educate, a huge part of what Girl Rising advocates for in the education for women is that when you educate women, you educate an entire community. Oftentimes, you know, we have data that shows that when men are educated, a lot of the times they horn in on that education and kind of like, you know, leave with it, or they use it to increase their status in the society. But when women are educated, we see the trickle-down effect of their children are often educated as well. They pass on that knowledge within the community and they share that. So when we're thinking about how we're going to be moving forward and addressing climate solutions, ignoring part of the population that is often the center of the family, the center of the community, and passes down that information is really not going to serve us in the future. I believe Ellen, I believe Virginia, you talked about youth engagement. This is really important, especially from my profession running the fellowship program. You know, young activists today, you know, I read an article, I wish I could remember from where, that talked about how a lot of the younger generations are going into climate solution-based careers because they don't see a point in pursuing anything else. There, you know, we talk a lot in the fellowship about how that's impacting their mental health, how that's affecting their ability to look at the future optimistically. And I really, when I think about youth activism and engagement, I really think what's going to be important for us as adults is to think about how we can engage youth in climate solutions in a way that doesn't burden them mentally, and to also consider the ramifications of how that, you know, how we educate them and how we can educate, you know, how we can educate them in a way that empowers them to want to act and not just makes them feel as though, you know, we have screwed them for the future. And so I really think that's what really struck to me about that. The last point I wanted to bring up was, you know, some of the, I believe Mila and as well as Vanessa talked about the space that we create for women. That's going to be a really key issue because, you know, and that's, I think that kind of ties everything together. Creating a space, not just a space for women to feel safe, to speak on issues that, the issues that impact them with climate change, but also a space to feel empowered to contribute to solutions. And this is impossible to do without the involvement of men, without having men as allies. And because a lot of women live in societies where they're not, you know, privileged enough to have a voice, and they're not privileged enough to contribute these solutions. And also thinking about indigenous communities of women who maybe within their communities are actually empowered and actually do lead the communities and have a lot of these solutions. But then as we approach climate solution from a Western perspective, we often ignore those solutions as well. So thinking about how we can incorporate that as well. And the last point is that as part of Girl Rising, you know, and Future Rising, we talk a lot about, you know, our mission is to advocate for the education of girls so that they can tackle climate change. And a lot of the pushback we often get is, why the emphasis on girls? You know, why don't we just say educate children? And that's some of the points I brought up before. We need to prepare girls and young women to have the skills to tackle the sort of extreme weather and natural disasters that are going to be impacting their communities. Whilst, you know, this, you know, we need to, because a lot of women and girls are responsible for securing food and water and shelters within their rural communities. It's vital that we prep them with the education that they need to have those solutions. It's not enough to just assume that there will be, you know, if we focus on educating the men or if we focus on Western approaches, that it will somehow trickle down into these communities when women aren't given any resources or education at all. We need to make a deliberate effort to help young girls and women catch up to the disparity in education, disparity in access to resources that they've had over the years, so that they can be prepared for this changing world. You know, building women in leadership roles, you know, shown to result in better environmental outcomes. And, you know, as I always laugh with my boss, you know, the world has been led by men for hundreds of years. We've tried it, you know, so let's try a solution where we empower women and give them the same resources and include them in these solutions and work together to come up with solutions that work for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Flavia. And thank you for taking the time to kind of respond to some of the things that you've already heard in the conversation. It was really nice to hear your reactions. Thank you. Over to you, Tashika.
It's great. Thank you all so much. First of all, like, first you read the statement and you have your own insights, and then you hear these comments and it makes it that much richer. So I want to thank you all for your comments before me. I think about Ashu and her comments regarding, access to language and making language accessible, which is something that really, brought that statement to life as well. And Nishat's comment about teaching the children, and Flavia a moment ago speaking about women being the first educators for their children. So I'm very grateful for those comments. Regarding the statement, I was very encouraged that the statement recognizes the whole of community or society approach towards addressing, effectively how to engage women in leadership positions when we think about addressing the climate crisis. And I think that was very important because if you think about women and, the state of affairs of women today, it does require the entire society, community, individuals to, reorient ourselves towards thinking of ways to uplift the value of women, recognize the true, value and skills women bring to solve these particular issues. And to me, as a woman, my mom, looking at the way in which they solve, crisis throughout their life, women come with this natural ability, nature versus society, to, think about the whole of society, to, be selfless, to care, to have this intuition. You just know there's a knowing aspect of women. And when you think about, what skills are needed to effectively address the climate crisis, it requires these same skills that women naturally, in many ways, embody: care, selflessness, thinking about the whole of society, not being in this mode of competition or aggressiveness. And, if you think about, when we think about climate crisis, the cause of climate crisis, think about what needs to occur. It requires a whole of society, community, individual approach to think about, what is beneficial for the whole of the world, the whole of communities. How can we be selfless in order for the society to advance? And these are skills that when women are engaged in these positions of leadership can naturally bring to help resolve the issue. We no longer think about, overconsumption without thinking about, the trees or the environment. We can no longer think about how to enrich myself or how to enrich my country. It has to be that, I don't want to say feminine qualities, but qualities more associated with women, about care and selflessness, and, caring about the whole of society. So I was very encouraged, by the statement's emphasis of the value women would bring into these discussions. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for your comments. I think, reorienting ourselves about the value women naturally bring to solving these issues and what is necessary for a climate crisis to be addressed requires that 50% to engage actively in this particular crisis. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jashika. Over to you. Insi, is that how I pronounce your name? Please correct me.
Inji.
Inji, thank you. You have the floor.
It means pearl in Turkish, in English. Well, it's very exciting to hear many voices from all over the world, and it's very exciting to be here. Today, maybe we are in different countries and maybe it's winter time, it's very cold outside, or it's very sunny in summer in some of the part of the world. But there is only one fact. We are living under the same atmosphere of Earth. We have a unique home, and it's Earth. We are living in the same ship. We are not living in different ships. So whenever something goes wrong in one country, in one part of the nature, there's something wrong in other sides as well. So it's a unique system. It's like a human body, you know. If there's a pain in my arm, the system is not functioning well. So we should think everything in a system. I think in one of the opening speeches, it was said that the climate change is a symptom rather than the illness itself. The illness itself seems to be, it is said so, it's a quotation, it is the real illness is the masculine systems and the materialism. So I think we should take it into consideration. So what does it mean, the meaningful participation of women in decision-making levels? I think having a minor voice in the decision-making mechanisms is not enough. Okay, one of the speakers told us that, okay, if there is women around the table, so the voice is heard. But is it enough? I think it's not enough. We have to fight for the 50% quota. I think Fatma is here, and really we are fighting for this. Also in Turkey, we are not close to this ratio. So as long as we are not in the decision-making levels at government levels, as 50%, the voice of women cannot be heard properly, I guess. The other issue that I would like to change, that all the governments in all the countries are not at the same level regarding the awareness of climate change. So what are the upcoming negative effects of the climate change? What are the basic solutions to climate change? So just as the Declaration of the Rights of Children, there should be a kind of declaration of United Nations, I guess. The importance of the climate change, the declaration of the importance of the climate change, and the necessary actions to be taken in such a way that it should not be a kind of advisory declaration, but a declaration that all the countries should be taken into consideration seriously, because it's not an issue belonging to some of the countries. It is an issue belonging to all the countries, to our home earth. Regarding the education, I'm very impressed about the experience of Nisha. Educating the children in climate change issue in secondary school, not in a theoretical way only, but also bringing the kids into the nature and let them to understand what's really in there. So I think such an issue should be applied in all the schools, in all the countries, not as a advisory lesson, but as a must lesson. I think it's very important and very exciting approach to this. Also, in my social project, I'm dealing with some education of adults. Unfortunately, in Turkey, there are lots of adults who has not been very lucky to take the proper education during their childhood. And what we are doing here in our social projects, we are bringing the specialists to their attention, and we are making a kind of bridge so that they can hear the voices of the specialists and can take the necessary information. So I'm very happy to be here. And also the last speaker touched the notion of selflessness. You know, it's very important. In other words, altruistic behavior. I think we should be in a world, while we are dealing with the issue of climate change, we should be in an altruistic point of view, which means that the earth doesn't belong to me only. This soil doesn't belong to me, earth. It also belongs to you. And your earth belongs to me as well. So we are under the same sky. We are living on the earth. Thank you so much to all the speakers.
Thank you, Inji. Some really powerful points there and some great analogies too. So thank you so much for sharing that. I did see Peter Aburi, you had your hand, but maybe we can come back to you and we'll turn to Fatma for now. Fatma, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Safira. Nice to see you again, by the way. Yes, I just came back from this small room. We shared a lot, really. I feel very happy when I am sharing something with the youth. I trust in youth, not in my age, not the older age, not the old white man, never ever. As Inji said, today in the morning, there was a town hall meeting from the Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, United Nations. This year, I have to tell that the speeches, the messages are really very powerful, more powerful than ever, I can tell. I mean, they have given very powerful messages, both Antonio Guterres and Sima Bahaus and all the, the ambassadors, everybody is giving very powerful messages because everyone understood that the world is going, I mean, in a terrible way, If we come back to our subject, climate justice, climate change is a matter of, everything is a matter of gender equality. If we cannot have a gender equal world, that means we will deal with the climate change, we will deal with the financial inequality, equal pay, whatever the problem, you name it, it will be continuing, it will be going on forever. We should have a gender equal world. This is crucially important. As Inji said, in Turkey, I mean, in Turkey, 17% in the parliament, decision point is not only parliamentary, is everywhere. But if you come to the top of the top decision point, the politics, we are in 17%, now the world average is 25%. Even in the US Parliament, the women representation is more than 25%, in spite of the terrible, not terrible, I mean, it's not the proper word, it's in spite of their election system. According to election system, once you get into the Senate, you are in the Senate forever. I mean, until you die. As long as you wish, you are in the Senate. That is why the women can get into the system and can have the seat in the parliament in US. It is a very inspiring story, in fact. So if we come to our story, we are going in a different way, in a terrible way, to tell the truth. education is a part of it. As Inge said, we have to put education, climate justice education from the primary school, not primary school, in fact, kindergarten, and gender equality education. It is very important. The parliaments are signing the agreements. There is a United Nations Convention like CEDAW. CEDAW is convention on eliminating every kind of discrimination against women, and nobody is applying it. Can you imagine that? Or Afghanistan signed the agreement. And I mean, look at the Afghanistan. Is there any elimination against women? Can you see it there? It is unbelievable. They are signing the agreement and they are not implementing it. Istanbul Convention, Turkey signed the agreement, implemented, then they quit the agreement. And there is no sanction on it. If you sign the agreement, there should be a sanction with the agreement. If there is no sanction, the parliaments, the government, according to their, their will, political, there is no political will. So they are not implementing it. There should be a system change, and we need a gender equal system. If we have a gender equality, starting from the parliament and in all decision point, in all, the private sector, the government sector, community, the high, education, academics, you name it, everywhere. We should have a gender equal system. Not only with the number of women. Number of women is very important, to tell the truth. If you put the women there, be sure that they are going to change it. They are going to find the right things, the proper way to do. But with the mentality as well, with the discourse as well. Everything, as a whole system, I'm talking about whole system. And as a group of people here, especially the women, we should work for it, and I believe that we will, and I trust in the youth in that way. Thank you for giving the floor, Safira. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatma, and also thank you for your work and your activism. I know the situation for gender equality in Turkey is quite delicate and quite challenging, so really appreciate you being here and the work that you're doing to navigate these issues. So I wanted to turn to Peter. If you still wanted to raise your hand and offer some thoughts, please go ahead.
Thanks, Safira. I share two perspectives. One is on leadership and the other one is on education. On leadership, I'll give an example of the late Professor Wangari Maathai, who was the Nobel Peace Prize for Environment from Kenya. And the work Wangari did was more of like, battling the male system to be able to protect and conserve forests across Kenya. And I think not only across Kenya, but I think across the world and through the Green Belt movement. And so it wasn't as easier, and you all can, read stories about Wangari Maathai's, persecution and being arrested and being, beaten and being, jailed. And this is true, like the genuine commitment that she had towards, protecting, the forests, and to be able to say that women as mothers and who cares about nature she took the lead, and she had a movement of very strong women with her that were really fighting it. And then, that itself really calls upon, a leadership rethinking. And when you look at the leadership structures of today, and then you look, say, for example, in Africa, the constitution say you give 1/3 of the seat, say, of, the governance or, the government or, even private sector. And I relate this with a very close friend who's retired Justice Effie Owuor, who was the first African or a first female appellate court judge in Kenya. She said, if you keep saying that we give 1/3 to women, because you say we give, so that is men defining that we just want 1/3 of women to be in the space, then you control how they behave in the space. And you manipulate the system that if they are there, a number of them, so the system does not really allow them to be, part and parcel of decision making, but you just want to show face that, oh, women are represented, but their voice is completely not even heard. So she said, the best way that we could look and rethink going forward is education. And we have to educate them. And she challenged me, she said, Peter, I want you boys to really, she's older lady, so she said to me, Peter, I want you boys to be educated to respect your sisters and your girls and your mothers, so that when it comes to such issues of gender-based violence, vulnerability of girls and, the cultural, challenges that women go through day to day, climate change issues, we are looking at each other as equals. Not that there is a special one that has more, to say or has more to offer because of their sex, but it is that the climate change issues are affecting all of us equally, But there is an aspect of one of the speakers who were sharing that, for example, in the context of Africa, women go to the river to get the water, women go to the forest to look for firewood to cook, women, do all the household chores. If you look at the context of like boys and girls, so the boy will come from school, drops his books, goes to play. The girl goes the opposite direction. She goes looking for water, goes looking for the vegetables, or assist the mother to do household chores. And the boys are playing, football out, and then they are hungry, they come back for food. So there is not an equal platform where boys and girls are educated and they can do the same chores. If he's, preparing vegetables, they can do the same. If he's, tilling the farm, they can do the same. They have equal rights and opportunities. And there is not a sex that is marginalized because they are girls or because they are women. So I think, in a nutshell, there is still a great opportunity, and we could see this with the, with technology and access, say, to social media, where girls are being educated or boys are being educated, that we all are equally being affected, but we still need to do more to bring it to, to better spaces and to bring it more, the reality of education, the reality of leadership. And it's not like we have to create special seats for women that we manipulate and control, but women have to be educated equally, that they can participate through their capacities and education and experiences, and we respect their voice as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing those thoughts. And really, it's been so wonderful to hear from so many different voices around the world, and really outstanding work that each of you are doing. And just so appreciative to have had this opportunity to hear from you. I wanted to just open up to see if there was anyone who hasn't yet had a chance to speak, who would like to offer any reactions or comments at this point before we wrap up our time together today. I wanted to make sure that everyone who has been invited to prepare to speak and who would like to offer some thoughts has the opportunity to do so. Go ahead, Steve.
I've loved this conversation so much. I think it's been enriching and beautiful, and I'm so grateful that we've been able to come together in this way. The only thing I'll add on to all of the comments that have been shared would be a reflection on public and private lives. I think a lot of what we've been talking about here is the transformation of our public systems. And like there's been some mentions of like family and how education begins within the family, and that it's women and particularly mothers who are really bringing the education to children for that next generation. I want to double down on that and helping us think about, if we are to create these transformations, we must create structures within our private lives as well that can model what we wish to see happen in the public space, right? And whether that is us ourselves taking those actions or being the kind of like that silent guardian and reminder to those who public lives may differ drastically from their private lives, to hold them to account. I think as human beings, we are prone to hypocrisy in how we present ourselves in public and private spaces. And so to be able to be in a space of accompaniment as we hold each other to account, I think is another effort we must strive to do.
Thank you so much, Steve. Yeah, thank you for bringing that point to the fore. And so perhaps we can turn to our last speaker, Dr. Thandika, if you would like to say a few words, please go ahead. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Thandeka Mazibuko. I specialize in radiation oncology. I'm in a field which is very poorly represented, especially in Black and Brown community. I was the first Black in South Africa, KZN, to become a woman who specializes in oncology. We understand that cancer affects everybody and cancer does not discriminate, but we faced a huge challenge as women of color in this space. And I apologize that maybe my face is not showing. I was trying to get the video on, but I decided that we should start a program that's going to empower women. So my advice to women is we have to start creating spaces to bring the equity up front. Because if we are complaining all the time about challenges that we're facing, we may not see the fruits. And I appreciate this platform. I want to thank Hawa for inviting me to come and be part of this platform. My message is let's create opportunities as women for women. Let's create more. Like I am in the field of oncology. I started a movement to be able to educate more young girls to come into the space of oncology. So I'm coming on the perspective as a woman of saying, let's have the solution to the problem of lack of equity. Let's drive the movement forward. But the most important thing is to have support from organizations like this, because when you stand up to uplift others, you need a foundation that is strong, that can empower you, that can support you. So support is everything, and doors being opened like Howard has done for me to invite me to this meeting. So what I'm requesting is that, yes, there are challenges, but what are we doing about those challenges at a bigger scale? The other point I would like to add is issue of funding. We are not aware of the funding opportunities that can fund women to get into those fields where there are no women, like women in STEM, women in engineering, women in aviation. So many women are skilled. They are doing very well in their academic lives. I've met so many A students who are working in the garden, and I had to help them apply at the universities. We don't know the opportunities of funding, because without money, we may not be able to bring the equity, because you have to qualify to sit on those roles. We don't want a situation where we have women leaders, but who are not qualified. We want women who are equipped, qualified with credentials to sit in those positions. That is part of equity and equality. But definitely we need more representation of women in many seats. But we see a huge difference, and we appreciate gentlemen who were speaking before me, who is advocating for equity. And that is what we need. But also as women, we need to uplift the men and honor the men who are supporting us. Because sometimes we talk equity and we don't acknowledge the men who put us in those positions, the men who are sitting in those boardrooms and say, I vote for Dr. Mazibuko to come into this seat. So it works both ways, and I appreciate this platform. I also started a Women of Magnitude Awards, and I would like you to contact me later, which is something I'm not going to discuss about, but we have Women of Magnitude Awards. We honored 4 women on International Women's Day. Even during COVID-19, we said there is no way we're going to stop advocating for women. So what we did during COVID-19, we went online and still honored women. So we appreciate you, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thandika, for these final words and some really wonderful points. And we're right on time, so we're out of time. I know there was so much to say, and really such a deep thank you to all of our speakers and to everyone who read the statement, came prepared with some remarks to share, and just for the very insightful contributions that were shared from so many diverse places around the world. So to close our time together, I'd like to introduce to you Miss Vanessa Chisakula, who is a multi-award winning spoken word artist and women's rights champion, who uses poetry as a tool for activism. She is a co-founder of a Pan-Africanist social movement called Word Smash Poetry, which promotes youth participation in governments through the arts. And so I'd like to invite Vanessa to close us out today with one of her spoken word pieces touching on gender and climate change. So Vanessa, the floor is yours.
Perfect. So I'm going to be reading 2 poems and focusing on gender and climate change. I am super enlightened and so many ideas just flowing in my head after listening to the different opinions that came from all over the world, literally. And so this is my first poem, and it is called Storm is a Woman. When disaster struck, it unapologetically called my mother's name. The flood took my sister's womanhood, left her to wander on no man's land in a man's land and a man's world. Her dignity covered by rock from the land, slight victory from the patriarchal induced election of men as heads, women as tails or snakes who slid off the ladders from any top position, and they became an uproar of controversy, moving angrily in no specified direction. Don't you know that storms are named after women because hell hath no fury? Women are nature, and nature is women. As volcanoes rupture in the earth's surface to allow hot liquid, women per 28 moons rupture to let flow hot liquid. Like a wildflower, a woman on fire travels far and wide, disrupts systems and provides for her young. You see nations fall and rise at the hands of women. There's a trace of God in her eyes. Her palms are a generational survival guide. When women lead, development is evident, equality is the order. There are stories of queens who walked on water as one with nature, a spiritual statement, because when you think of nature, think of God, and when you think of God, think of a woman. Thank you. That was my first piece, and my second piece is a piece that I wrote when I realized that we should all be climate activists because we want to wake up to a sane environment the next day. So I'll go straight in. When we changed our ways, the climate changed. Everything changed and we changed. Sustainable development is necessary. Our darling earth is almost naked. Restoration for our environmental degradation is an emergency, a global issue beyond myth. Pick up your call for responsibility. The people from America are the people from Zambia, and the people from Zambia are the people from all over the world. You and I are trees, animals, land, rivers, and seas. So what alternatives do we offer? May we stop burning down trees to get paper to write on #SaveTheTrees. You break homes because those are family trees. You don't burn waste, burn fat. When we have errant power cuts in the global south, this is the Earth's reminder of our inability to utilize free gifts. You see that for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son, so solar energy is our alternative. Wonderful wonders woven within wild, tintillates theatrical, tender thoughts. Consistently, creation contrives conservation concerns. Ecology evolves equations, entitling entities' essence. Charcoal cookers chalk continuity, life lovingly leases longevity. Biodiversity bresses blunted brutal balding, building bold blocks beautiful. Deforestation, destruction devoid due definition. People physically plundering planet, prevalently procuring products prescribed. Purifying practices producing poisonous pollutants, greenhouse gases generated generously grievous. Temperate temperatures, tempest tumultuous, creating climate changes, causing catastrophes, planet purges per real predominantly. Preached placid platitudes, politicians, podiums best. Loved lives logged, listed, lost. Lacuna languished, lessons least lent. Losing life lingers, listing leeward lazily. No new non-nems nemesis, but sweet, sustainable energy synergies. Weaving wild world, wow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. What a gorgeous, eloquent, powerful way to wrap up all of the sentiments that have been shared in all of our discussions throughout this event. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
And thank you so much for having me.
Of course, such a pleasure. And thank you all to everyone who stayed for the full 2 hours. I know we're a little bit over time, but so much appreciation and looking forward to future collaborations and continuing this conversation with you all. Thank you all so much.